opportunity to play the first episode of Life is Strange 2. So today I'm going to be talking about different aspects of the game and kind of giving my take on the game so far. Now obviously spoilers up until the end of episode 1, so if you haven't played Life is Strange 2, you might want to play that first, at least through episode 1 before watching this video. Here's the time where you click away if you haven't played it, and going on. The first thing I want to talk about is the music and the graphics. As I've said in a previous video, the music for Life is Strange is absolutely amazing. Life is Strange 2 is a little bit different than the previous entries in the Life is Strange franchise because the main characters don't have as much access to their own music, because the whole theme of Life is Strange 2 is going on a journey. They're listening to music from other people rather than their own, so the variety of music in Life is Strange 2 is a lot larger than in the previous entries to the franchise. That being said, even when there's a song that's slightly outside of the realm of what I would think as Life is Strange, I still really like their choices, and I especially like the incorporation of Spanish music. That's one of the type of musics that I really listen to, and I feel like in America we kind of are very English-centric, so it's great to see music from other languages and other cultures. The graphics have also taken a huge jump from the first Life is Strange. It seems like every little thing that you encounter has some sort of unique detail about it, and I really like that they paid attention to all of that. It makes the world feel very real, like it has a history and a story behind it. Moving on to the actual gameplay. The game starts from a cop's perspective, specifically from the dash cam of his car. You see him stop because of an altercation. You hear some people talking and some sounds, and then the camera flips over and you realize that something has gone horribly wrong. There's calls for backup on the radio, there's sirens, and it's not entirely clear what has happened, but it's clear that it was something bad. I had mixed feelings about the beginning of Life is Strange 2 because the events that you're seeing from the cop's camera are not the first thing that happens, but you know they're coming. So I feel like that kind of clouds your perception of what you're supposed to do as a character. You kind of already know that there's this bad event coming and you're gonna have to go on the run. And so knowing that kind of changes the way that you might interact with things. For example, in the beginning you have the choice of bringing different beverages, and knowing that you are probably going to be running away with your little brother, you don't really want to grab the beer. Whereas if you didn't know that that's what was going to happen and you thought that you were going to be able to go to the party that he was preparing for, you might have grabbed that instead. So I definitely feel that having that first scene clouded the way that people played the beginning of the game, and I wonder if it was necessary to put that in. It definitely was a dramatic start, and it called a lot of attention to some themes that are going to be carried out throughout this game. But still, I kind of wonder if it was necessary. Now I know that the scene was shown in preview, so a lot of people, including myself, had already seen it anyways, but I was playing the game with my boyfriend who hates spoilers and had not seen previews. For him, it was his first time seeing that. I wonder if our conversations when we were playing the beginning would have been different if that scene was not included. The value of the intro of Life is Strange 2 comes from it addressing the themes that are going to be prevalent throughout the game. It calls to mind a lot of the events that have been happening with police in America specifically over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of conflict here, and I feel like the game is definitely drawing on that aspect of American society. I know that some people have really enjoyed the fact that this game is political, and some people are very against the idea that a game should make a political standpoint. I think that it's important to explore issues that society is facing, and I think video games are a fantastic means to do that because they really put you in the mind of someone in that situation in a way that a lot of other mediums can't. For example, if you have a video, yeah, you're kind of getting that person's perspective, but you're not really making choices as if you were that person. You're just watching and getting the information. So by playing as a character going through a difficult situation that is reminiscent of the things that are currently happening in the world right now is much more powerful. My boyfriend even said as we were playing that he wasn't sure if he was going to like this game as much because we both really enjoyed Life is Strange 1, and he was worried worried that the different characters wouldn't have as much of an impact, but as soon as he realized that the game was going to have this political message to it and it was going to touch on these very serious issues and topics, he said, okay, I'm gonna like this game a lot more than I originally thought. I definitely think it's to the game's benefit to include those topics and to talk about them. The great thing about any media is that you can enjoy it without necessarily agreeing with it. I know for me personally, a lot of my politics are aligned to this game, but I could see a situation where someone disagreed with certain aspects or thought they were played more for dramatic effect than for realism, and I could definitely see people criticizing the game for that. So while I think that critique may or may not be valid, I don't think that makes including political content bad. Moving on. The main plot of the story is about two brothers, Sean, the older brother, and Daniel, the younger brother, who are on a journey to their father's childhood town. This town is called Puerto Lobos, and it is in Mexico. First off, I really love the name that they chose for this town. Puerto means door, and Lobos means wolves. So it's talking about this idea of transition, like how you pass through a door, but it's also including this idea that they're kind of these wild wolves who are on this journey. Additionally, I really like the choice of wolves because of the idea of a pack. I think this also ties into the political themes because in America, it does often seem like it's one pack versus the other pack, like Republicans versus Democrats all the time. By comparing the boys to wolves, I think that's kind of referencing this pack mentality. However, I think that with the boys, it's talking more about the positive aspects of having a pack. Sean and Daniel would be completely lost without each other. I can't imagine either of them being okay on this journey without the other. Even though pack mentality isn't necessarily a good thing, the idea of being able to rely on your pack, I think, is something that's pretty positive. Also, speaking of the brothers as a pack, we have an interesting dynamic where Sean is older and therefore is kind of the pack leader, but Daniel is younger and has powers. His powers give him a strength that Sean will never possess. So even though Sean is older and is taking on this leadership role, if it was a battle of actual physical strength, I think that Daniel would end up winning. It will be interesting to see how their little pack of two resolves this problem over time. Is Daniel going to use his powers to get control? Is Sean going to use diplomacy to make sure that he kind of stays in power? I guess we'll wait and see. My theory right now is that it depends on the choices that you make. I think that if you make choices that cause Daniel not to trust Sean, I think that their pack dynamics could erode and Daniel might try to get control. Speaking of Sean and diplomacy, it seems like this game focuses a lot on honesty and promises. There's a scene where you can promise Daniel that you're going to get him a choco bar, and then later you have the option to either get him that choco bar or not get him that choco bar. In my playthrough, I promised to get him the choco bar, and I did, and Daniel noticed that I fulfilled my promise. Daniel's definitely the type of kid who's very attuned to this idea of promises and fulfillment. So I think it's really important that the promises that Sean makes to him, he ends up keeping. Even the very last scene of episode 1 had to do with promises. Sean has been keeping the secret that their dad has actually died. Daniel finds out that secret and kind of freaks out a little bit. Now, if Sean had been honest earlier, Daniel probably wouldn't have done that. And it seems like this ending of episode 1 could lead into episode 2, where they might have to leave the motel very quickly because Daniel has used his powers. I think that it also shows that honesty and promises are a lot more difficult when you're in dire circumstances. It's easy to make a promise when life is kind of going along, nice and easy, predictable, but when life gets hard, it's much more difficult to keep those promises. There's a lot more random chance, and there's a lot of things that you think you wouldn't do that you might do for the sake of survival. I think it's interesting to see that relationship between honesty and promises and desperation. Lastly, I want to talk about some of the characters that really stood out to me. The first one that stood out as an amazing person was Lila. Lila is cool and chill and genuinely a really nice person. She seems to really care about Sean. Why would you go after Jen when there's Lila? I mean, let's not make assumptions. Maybe she's not interested in him or he's not interested in her, whatever, but I feel like they'd be a really cute couple. Second character of note, Brody. Brody came from a family that he didn't really agree with and chose to take his own path and take control of his own life. A lot of people in my generation face similar issues because of how quickly the world has been changing. I mean, when I was a kid, the idea of getting paid to create videos on YouTube was not a thing, and now some people do that for their careers. Working from home or being able to travel and work was also not really as much of a thing when I was a kid. You pretty much stayed in one spot, worked in a big company, factories, bells, whistles. Nowadays, technology has completely changed how we live and work. So I really like how Brody shows that difference between previous generations and the current generation, and how it's kind of caused this schism between younger people and their families. And lastly, I want to give a nod to Mushroom, the most adorable puppy ever. His name reminds me of the power-ups from Mario, kind of like his Daniel's little power-up. And on that adorable note, we've reached the end of this video. If you have comments about what I said, feel free to leave that below. If you liked it, click the like button, and if you want to see more, click subscribe. Bye!